A single car purchase can quietly bankrupt your future. It doesn't scream, it whispers. You sign, you drive, you get compliments, and 10 years later, you wonder why your retirement account is smaller than you'd expected. That's not drama. That's arithmetic and bad incentives. I'll be blunt. If you buy cars on your salary, you're making the decision that systematically destroys optionality. You're trading future freedom for short-lived approval. I learned that the hard way in small ways and through watching others make much bigger mistakes. I drove a modest car for 13 years when I was younger, a choice that felt ordinary at the time. Over decades, those ordinary choices pile up into extraordinary consequences. That's the hidden cost I want you to see. Here's the thesis. A car is not just the sticker price. The true cost is purchase price plus finance and interest, insurance, maintenance, fuel, taxes, registration, and all the incidental expenses, minus whatever you get back when you sell it. More important than the net loss is the opportunity cost, what that money could have earned, invested instead. Small differences, compounded over time, produce life-changing gaps in wealth. This is math. And like most harsh truths, it's forgiving only if you pay attention early. Let me start with one of those small mistakes that becomes a story later. Early in my career, I remember people buying flashy new cars as if they were investments in identity. Picture a young man proud of a gleaming Buick in 1955. He paid about $3,200 for it. Respectable money then. Now imagine instead that he had put that $3,200 into a broadly diversified stock portfolio and left it alone. Historically, the broad stock market has returned roughly 10% per year on average. Using that historical average as an illustrative assumption, not a promise, a $3,200 lump sum compounded at 10% annually over many decades could hypothetically grow into the low millions by the present day. That's not witchcraft. That's exponential growth. I'm not telling you this to rub it in. I'm telling you this to change the lens through which you view everyday decisions. The Buick looked great for a while. It made the owner feel like he had arrived. But the counterfactual, the what if, is the real measure of cost. When you spend money, not only are you reducing your bank balance today, you're also foregoing the returns that money might have generated for decades. That foregone earnings is the hidden cost. Here's the brutal math most people never run. Let's take a realistic modern example so you can see each piece of the puzzle. Imagine a $50,000 new car. Reasonable mid to high trim for many buyers. On the surface, that's 50 grand, and people act as if that's the only figure that matters. Start with what you pay up front. Say you put down $5,000. Sales tax is often charged at purchase. At an 8% rate, that's another $4,000. So right away, you needed roughly $9,000 in cash to take possession. You finance the rest, $45,000 at an annual interest rate of 6% for 5 years. At that rate, your monthly payment is roughly $870. Over 60 months, that's about $140 paid back to the lender, principal and interest. The interest portion of that is roughly $100. That's money that could have been working for you instead. Now add insurance. For a $50,000 vehicle, insurance can easily run $1,500 to $2,000 a year, depending on your situation. Use $1,800 as a conservative middle number. Over 5 years, that's $9,000. Maintenance and repairs for a new to 5-year-old car can average, let's say, $1,200 per year. Oil changes, tires, brakes, the occasional sensor, that check engine light that never seems polite. Over 5 years, that's $6,000. Fuel depends on driving patterns, but $2,000 a year is a fair round figure for many drivers. Over 5 years, $10,000. Registration and miscellaneous taxes might add $200 a year. Over 5 years, that's $1,000. Add these flows up the way money actually leaves your pocket. Down payment, $5,000 plus. Financed payments, $52,940. Insurance, $9,000 plus. Maintenance, $6,000 plus. Fuel, $10,000 plus. Registration of $1,000. About $8,300 forward and cash out over 5 years. Now, what do you have to show for it? After 5 years, a $50,000 car often only retains maybe 45% of its original value, depending on make, model, and mileage. Let's be conservative and say its resale value is $20,000. Subtract that resale. $8,340, $20,000. Roughly $63,140 net cost over 5 years. That's about $12,600 per year for transportation. Those are illustrative estimates. Your numbers will differ, but they reveal the principle. The sticker price is only the starting point. Mini hook. Let me show you what your ego is costing you. Now imagine a different choice. Instead of buying that $50,000 new car, you buy a reliable used car for $15,000. A vehicle 2 to 3 years old with most of its initial depreciation already taken by someone else. You avoid the $5,000 down and the large financed principal. You take the $35,000 difference and invest it instead as a lump sum in a broadly diversified portfolio. For an illustrative comparison, use the historical average of roughly 10% per year for long-term equity returns. Again, an assumption for the scenario, not a guarantee. What happens to that $35,000? At 10% annual compounding, after 10 years, it would be about $91,000. After 20 years, about $235,000. After 30 years, about $611,000. Those are round, illustrative numbers. The point is not that you will hit these exact figures, markets vary, but that compound growth turns a one-time decision into vastly different futures. Even if you don't invest a lump sum, consider investing the monthly difference. If paying for the new car meant higher monthly payments by $500 compared to the used alternative, that $500 invested each month over decades compounds into a very large sum. Small monthly leaks add up. Here's another way to see the theft of freedom dynamic. Picture two professionals who earn the same salary for 40 years. Person A upgrades cars frequently, choosing new or near-new models, trading up as income rises. Person B buys used, keeps cars longer, and invests the difference. Let's be conservative. Let's say Person A spends an extra $15,000 per year on cars compared to Person B. Person B invests that $15,000 annually. Using the future value formula for annual contributions, at a 10% historical average return over 40 years, that stream grows to roughly $6.6 million. If the gap is $20,000 per year, the difference approaches $8.9 million. If you increase the assumed return or the number of years, you cross into double-digit millions. These are illustrative scenarios, not promises, but they powerfully show how lifestyle choices compound into life outcomes. People often say, "But I need a car to get to work." Of course, transportation is a legitimate expense. The question is, what kind of transportation and at what cost to your future options? Too many buy status, not mobility. They buy the feeling of success and confuse it with real financial success. Why does this happen? The psychology is simple and unrelenting. First, status signaling. Cars are one of the most visible ways to display wealth. It's a social shortcut. Second, hedonic adaptation. The thrill of a new purchase fades quickly. That shiny badge stops giving you the same pleasure within months, and suddenly you want the next thing. Third, lifestyle inflation. As income rises, people upgrade their standard of living and expenses grow to match. These forces conspire to make higher consumption feel like success, when in reality it shrinks your capacity to choose. I'll tell you about a neighbor I'll call Bob, not to mock him, but to illustrate the pattern. Bob liked new things. Every 3 to 5 years he'd lease or finance a new vehicle. He enjoyed the latest tech, the leather seats, the look that comes with a new model. He had good taste, and he enjoyed it. But every cycle of trade-in and new purchase meant fresh financing, higher insurance, and the same initial depreciation hit. Over decades, Bob's cars cost him not just money, but the peace that comes from optionality. He traded potential investments for a recurring demonstration of status. Compare Bob to someone who made a different, deliberate set of choices. Bought used, drove cars until the repair bill exceeded the vehicle's value, and funneled the difference into the market. Over time, Bob had impressive-looking parking spots. The other person had options: to work less, to travel, to take a lower-paying job that was more meaningful, or to retire sooner. That is what I mean by freedom being the truest measure of wealth. Here's a practical decision rule I've seen work. It's simple, but it requires discipline. 1. Pay cash when you reasonably can. Financing should not be the default. If you're paying with borrowed money that you service with your salary, you're substituting future income for present consumption, and you've lost leverage on compounding. 2. Buy used, ideally 2 out of 3 years old. The steepest depreciation happens in the first few years. Let someone else take that big hit. 3. Drive cars until the repair bill consistently exceeds the vehicle's value. Don't preemptively buy something prettier because you're bored. 4. Don't finance cars with your salary. If your monthly payment comes from your paycheck, you've effectively locked a portion of your life into a fixed obligation that reduces your flexibility. 5. Use investments to fund luxuries. One practical metric: if you insist on buying a car that costs $30,000, consider whether your invested capital could generate that amount in income. For example, at a hypothetical 6% dividend yield, generating $30,000 a year would require about $500,000 in invested capital. That rather stark number flips the question: do you want to buy a car by consuming capital or by enjoying the income generated by capital? The idea is to live off the returns of what you've built, rather than spending the capital itself to keep up appearances. These rules aren't moralizing, they're strategic. Frugality, in this sense, is not cheapness. It's having your priorities arranged so that optionality and freedom come before applause. It's choosing to be wealthy over appearing wealthy. Let's return to the $50,000 car example and connect the dots to opportunity cost. We calculated roughly $63,000 net cost over 5 years once you subtract resale. Take that $63,000 and ask, what would it look like invested? If you invested that lump sum at a historical average of 10% for 30 years, you're looking at something in the ballpark of $1.1 or $1.2 million. That's an estimate to make the point. The money you spend now can become a far larger resource later. Worse, if you buy a new one every 5 years instead of buying used and investing the difference, you could chase a life of perpetually diminished future freedom. Some people hear this and say, "I'll just invest the spare cash when I can." That's fair, but the behavioral trap is that when income rises, most people spend more. They call it lifestyle inflation. Salaries go up, and so do car payments, bigger houses, more expensive vacations. If you want the power of compounding, you must force a different habit. Increase savings as income rises, rather than increase consumption. Now for a practical small exercise. Pause and calculate the last car purchase you made. Write down the monthly payment. Multiply by how many years you expect to keep the car. Add an estimate of insurance, maintenance, fuel, and taxes for those years. Then subtract the likely resale value. Take that net number and consider what it would look like invested at a conservative rate for 20, 30 years. Don't take my word for it. Run your own numbers. This simple mental exercise changes behavior because it makes the invisible visible. Let's walk through a few more concrete comparisons to drive this home. Scenario: 2 professionals start working at 25 and keep working until 65, 40 years. Person A upgrades their car frequently and spends an extra $20,000 per year on automotive costs compared to person B, who buys used and invests the difference. Assume person B invests that $20,000 each year, and it grows at a historical average of 10% annually. Using the compound formula for regular contributions, after 40 years, person B will have roughly $8.9 million more than person A. If the annual gap is $15,000, that difference is about $6.6 million. Even if your assumptions are more conservative, you're still looking at a very large gap. These are illustrative scenarios, not guarantees. They're meant to show the scale of the effect. That scale matters because wealth buys something you can't wear in a parade: freedom. Freedom to choose less stressful work, to take more meaningful projects, to move, to retire earlier if you want, to act without the hair-trigger need for cash every month. You can't buy that freedom with monthly payments. Now, I expect someone will object. But cars are safer now, or newer cars have important features, or I need reliability for my commutes. I get it. The prescription isn't to drive junk. It's to be intentional. Buy reliable used cars. Prioritize features that matter to safety and utility, not vanity. Do the math. Sometimes a modest payment for a safer, newer model makes sense. Often, the difference in safety between a well-maintained late-model used car and a brand-new luxury trim isn't worth the enormous opportunity cost. Another practical point: leasing almost always favors the seller and the finance company, not you. Leases can make monthly payments look low, but they commoditize depreciation for your benefit and keep you in a cycle of perpetual payments. If you must get a new vehicle, buying used often beats leasing. I'll also lay out a small checklist you can use before signing anything. Calculate the total 5-year cash outflow for the car. Include down payment, taxes, finance payments, insurance, maintenance, fuel, registration. Estimate the car's likely resale value after your planned ownership period. Subtract resale to get net 5-year cost. Ask what that net cost would look like, invested at conservative rates over the medium and long term. Ask whether you are buying transportation or status. If it's status, reconsider. Consider a used alternative that meets your needs and invest the difference. If you want one hard rule to follow, consider this. If the car's price would meaningfully reduce your ability to save 15-20% of your income for retirement and other goals, it's probably too expensive. That rule aligns your present choices with future freedom. Before I close, let me confront the emotional side. People don't empty their pockets for cars because they prefer spreadsheets over leather. They want validation. They want to feel successful now. That desire is human. The corrective is not to eliminate pleasure, but to pick pleasures that accumulate optionality rather than destroy it, by experiences, relationships, and time. Those things compound differently in memory and in freedom. A modest car that gets you to where you need to go buys you both mobility and the money to buy choices. So here's a challenge. Do the short calculation I suggested right now. Write down the last car you purchased, run the 5-year cost, subtract the estimated resale, then run that net as an investment for 20, 30 years, using an online compound interest calculator. See how the picture changes. If that number bothers you, let it bother you into action. Final thought. Every payment you make today either buys you a temporary signal or it builds a future possibility. One reduces options, the other increases them. Which would you prefer? If you want freedom, start treating car purchases like the optionality killers they often are. Buy what you need, not what your neighbors applaud. Invest the difference and let compounding do the heavy lifting. Don't let a car ruin your life. Choose freedom over fleeting prestige. If you found this useful, subscribe for more practical, math-first thinking about money and choices. And run those numbers for yourself with a simple compound interest calculator. Your future self will thank you.